Every Halloween, the residents of Willow Street were known for their elaborate displays. On the 1st of October, the street would transform into a haunted spectacle of ghouls, ghosts, and glowing jack-o'-lanterns. The pinnacle of the street's decoration was the Watsons' front yard, where they erected a 12-foot skeleton from Home Depot, towering over the neighborhood like a silent sentinel of the season. But this year, something changed. The Watsons were out of town, and the towering skeleton remained boxed in their garage. One by one, the neighbors put up their decor, but without the giant skeleton, it felt like a piece of Halloween itself was missing. Days passed, and whispers spread among the children. They said the skeleton didn't like being left in its box too long. It needed to be out, watching over the neighborhood. The Thompsons, living next door to the Watsons, were the first to notice something strange. Mrs. Thompson swore she heard scratching noises coming from the Watsons' garage late one night, followed by a low, hollow moaning. Her husband dismissed it, blaming the wind or raccoons. Still, an unease settled over the street. On October 15th, the Watsons finally returned. They laughed at the stories of the restless skeleton but promised to put it up the next day. However, when Mr. Watson went to the garage the following morning, the box was gone. At first he thought it was a prank. Maybe the neighbors had decided to take matters into their own hands. But the skeletal footprints leading from the garage to the edge of the yard told another story. Large, deep impressions were embedded in the grass, far too big for any prankster. That night, the skeleton appeared. It stood, not in the Watsons' yard, but in the Thompsons'. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its eye sockets glowing with an eerie, faint light. The neighbors gathered, staring at the figure in bewilderment and fear. Mr. Thompson approached it hesitantly, reaching out a hand to touch its bony foot. Just as his fingers brushed the cold plastic, the skeleton's head snapped down, its jaw unhinging with a sickening creak. The crowd gasped, but Mr. Thompson stepped back unharmed. By morning, the skeleton was gone again. This time its footprints led to the Johnsons' house 2 doors down. Now, no one thought it was a prank. The mood on Willow Street turned grim. Children were kept indoors and curtains were drawn tight. They could hear it at night, the creaking of bones and the scraping of skeletal feet dragging along the pavement. Yet, whenever someone peered outside, the street was empty. On Halloween morning, the skeleton returned to the Watsons' yard, but it wasn't alone. It had grown. Wrapped around its legs and arms were smaller skeletons, twisted and malformed. Their bony fingers clutched at the giant's frame as if clinging for dear life. The neighborhood watched in horror as the giant skeleton turned its head slowly, its gaze sweeping across each house as if to take attendance. It stopped and stared at the Hendersons' house at the end of the street. The Hendersons were the last to put up their decorations. It wasn't for lack of enthusiasm, they simply thought they had more time. Frantic, they rushed outside to set up their display, hastily arranging plastic gravestones and cobwebs. But the skeleton waited. As night fell, the Hendersons retreated indoors, praying they had done enough. At midnight, a low rumbling echoed through the street. It was coming from the skeleton. The smaller bones on its body rattled as if in laughter. The Hendersons watched from their window, hearts pounding. The skeleton moved, its giant feet crushing the plastic gravestones as it approached their house. It stopped at their front door and extended a bony hand, rapping 3 times. Each knock echoed like thunder, rattling the windows and shaking the walls. The door opened on its own, revealing the pitch-black darkness inside. With one final spine-chilling creak, the skeleton leaned forward. It pulled itself into the Hendersons' home, bones scraping against the doorframe, squeezing its massive body through the entrance. The family screamed, but their cries were swallowed by the darkness as the door slammed shut behind the giant skeleton. Morning came and Willow Street was eerily silent. The skeleton was gone. In its place where the Hendersons' house once stood was nothing but a patch of barren ground. No rubble, no remnants, just emptiness. The Watsons' yard was different too. The grass was lush, as if nothing had disturbed it. No trace of the giant skeleton remained, except for a single skeletal hand protruding from the earth, half buried, its bony fingers stretched upward, waiting. No one on Willow Street dared delay their Halloween decorations again, for they knew the skeleton was still out there, waiting for those who forgot the one rule: never let Halloween come without inviting the skeleton to watch.